Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Dennis Schuler, and I'm your moderator of Wendepunkt, Inflection Points for Senior Leaders. I have a very special guest today, and that is Ann McLaughlin Korologos. Ann is a very accomplished woman who's devoted her life to public service. Specifically, she's a former U.S. Secretary of Labor, served as chairman of the Rand Corporation Board of Trustees from April 2004 until 2009. RAND, for those who don't know it, is a nonprofit institution that helps improve policy and decision-making through research and analysis. From October 1996 until December 2005, she served as senior advisor to Benedetto, Gartland & Company Incorporated investment banking firm in New York. In February 2002, Ann was appointed to the Independent Commission of the International Labor Organization. This commission comprised of presidents, politicians, academics, social experts, and a Nobel economics laureate addressed the social dimension of globalization. The commission's ultimate goal was to use the process of globalization as a resource to reduce poverty and unemployment, to foster growth and sustainable development, very much ahead of its time, obviously. The commission examined ways in which all international organizations can contribute to a more inclusive globalization process that is acceptable and fair to all. Their final report was released on February 24, 2004. From October 1996 until August 2000, she served as chairman of the Aspen Institute, an international nonprofit impartial educational institution founded in 1950. She currently serves as a member of the Board of Trustees. The mission of the Aspen Institute is to enhance the quality of leadership through informed dialogue about the timeless ideals and ideas and values of the world's great cultures and traditions as they relate to the foremost challenges facing societies, organizations, and individuals. From 1990 until 1995, she served as president of the Federal City Council in Washington, D.C., a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization comprised of 150 top business and civic leaders dedicated to improving the nation's capital. Ann was a visiting fellow at the Urban Institute, a private nonprofit policy research and educational organization. The Institute investigates the social and economic problems confronting the nation and the government programs and policies designed to alleviate those problems. On September 29, 1989, President George H.W. Bush appointed Ann chairman of the President's Commission on Aviation Security and Terrorism. The commission presented its final report to the president and concluded its work on May 15, 1990. The report reviewed and evaluated policy options in connection with the aviation security, with particular reference to the destruction of Pan American Airways Flight 103, that those you might remember was bombed and fell down over the city of, or the village of Lockerbie, Scotland. From 1987 to 1989, Ann served as the nation's 19th Secretary of Labor under President Ronald Reagan. As the government's top labor official and the president's chief advisor on labor and related issues, she focused public and private sector attention on the needs of the rapidly changing international and national workplace and workforce, clearly ahead of its time. Particularly, she directed Labor Department resources to identify, publicize, and address significant emerging demographic changes and the resulting labor-related challenges and issues such as child and other dependent care, worker shortages, skill gaps, and the needs of older workers. She also established a Workforce Quality Commission, a first blue ribbon commission to address workforce competitive issues in a global economy. Upon completion of her term, President Reagan awarded her the President's Citizen Medal in recognition of her public service. What a terrific accomplishment. Ann also served as Undersecretary of the Department of Interior, providing the day-to-day management of that 71,000 person department, and as an Assistant Secretary of the Department of Treasury, where she earned the department's highest honor, the Alexander Hamilton Award for Distinguished Leadership. Ann currently serves as a member of the Board of Directors of Capri Holdings, this is formerly Michael Kors, and additionally serves on the Board of Directors of the Middle East Investment Initiative, the Dana Foundation, and the Arts Campus at Willits. She's a member of the Board of Trustees of the Rand Corporation, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute, and the Anderson Ranch Art Center. She's a member of the Board of Governors of the Pardee Rand Graduate School. She also served on the Kellogg's board when I was the CHRO there, and this is where I developed a really great relationship with Ann. She's just terrific. Ann has been awarded honorary degrees from Marymount College, Tarrytown, New York, University of Rhode Island, New England School of Law, and the College of St. Elizabeth, Tri-State University, and Pardee Rand Graduate School. She's a native of Chatham, New Jersey, earned a BA degree from Marymount College and studied at the University of London and the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School of Business. She's married to Tom and lives in Washington, D.C. and in Balsa, Colorado, where she owns an art gallery. As I mentioned, she is just a terrific, accomplished woman, ahead of her time, devoted her life to public service. I couldn't be more thrilled to have her with me today to renew our friendship and to discuss topical issues that I hope will be both informative and interesting to you as the listener. Ann, it's good seeing you again. So let me jump to it if I can, Ann, and we'll start it from this point forward. So first of all, thanks for joining me, because I know you're busy. You got your own business out there, and you're always pulled from pillar to post. So I appreciate you making time for me. I wanted to start with, when you think about your remarkable career and life, what are the early forces that shaped you and your interest areas?
Interesting. I have reflected on this also as I talk to other young women, well, clearly family. We had an appropriate work ethic in the family. It was just part of life. So, you babysat and you walked dogs and you did things, and then pretty soon you had a summer job and blah, blah, blah. I would think that a big impact was going away to boarding school with the good nuns, I might add, where my mother also had gone in 1927 or something. And I would think there, and then subsequently college and beyond, and at home, but lifetime learning, I would put at the top of my list. A commitment to lifetime learning, not just going to school, but absorbing, learning everything around you. That's the good news and bad news. I became a little eclectic. But for another reason, not long ago, I found and read a little autobiography that was written in high school, from what I can tell, boarding school. It looks to me like it was a sophomore, junior year. And you had to sort of project where you were going to be. And this will give you a laugh. And I was, by gosh, going to be the editor of Vogue magazine. Okay. And that led me to major in English literature at Marymount College. And I never thought of it again. I can honestly say. So, but you asked that, I think the formative years were about learning. And that is still with me. And so at every moment, not that I have my head in a book, but I would take opportunities that came. And so I worked at the Greystone State Mental Institute for 2 summers as a recreational therapist. Subsequently, of course, that closed down along with others, and we need them back for a lot of people. God love them. And then the 5 and 10 cent store or whatever, did the junior year abroad. So my momentum was somewhat opportunistic. If it's here, why don't I try that? And fortunately, I traveled a lot with family, not abroad at that time, but around the States on business trips of my father's or whatever. So travel, learning, the arts as a whole was always introduced through both education and at home, I would say, and the value of that kind of surrounding, I guess I'd put it.
Yeah, it's interesting as I listen to you talk, because I haven't followed your path on boards, but I've been on the university boards for the last 20 years. And one of the things I get worried about with both faculty and administration and students is the insistent question they ask their kids, which is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? It almost creates a neurosis in kids.
Yeah. You feel the pressure.
Yeah, they feel the pressure. You're 21, 22, and you're graduating. I was just down at my alma mater, and This one kid asked me, should I feel bad because I don't know what I want to do? And I said, no. You should feel bad if you're not interested in exploring what that might look like, then that's a bad thing. But not knowing what you're not do it at 21, 22, how would you know? How would you possibly know?
Yeah. Well, you know, when I was Secretary of Labor, we did a report. This was circa 1988. We did a report, the New American Workforce, and what it would be. And to the point, and I certainly have lived this, you will be changing, I used to say then, and it's true now, you'll be changing not only jobs, but careers,
Yes.
multi-time in your lifetime. Whoa, you know, you don't go somewhere and do it for 50 years or 30 years or whatever. So that's part of, I think, what we see happening now, you know. So I think I think you have to have intellectual energy. You have to like people. That sort of helps. And have a good sense of humor.
Indeed.
Which I do.
Indeed.
And,
which is a nice segue to my second question, which is, have you ever pinched yourself when you look back and say, wow, well done, Ann?
well,
you've had a fabulous career. So you do any
well,
retrospective look?
Yeah, I have looked back, and one expression I use is, gosh, I hope they don't find me out. And the other is, when I was about to go on the GM board, I said to a friend, what am I doing on the GM board? In those days, GM was, you know, was Amazon or whatever. And I said, maybe another friend said, well, maybe you have the imposter syndrome. You know, what am I doing here? And a third friend said, and it's like Saturday Night Live. They used to say, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and God darn it, people like you. So I said, I'll take it. But I look back and I think of two things. One, yes, it's been amazing. And when you look at it, it also appears the way it was, which was somewhat unplanned. Which leads me to say, what do I tell young people who talk to me today or the last 20 years? Do a good job. Take the opportunity. You never know who's watching. And I can trace my whole career for someone asking me, would you come here? Would you go there? Now that sounds somewhat easy and spoiled, but somewhere along the line, I was doing something right. And if you have no fear in the sense of you have a modest opinion of yourself, so you can't have fear, you're authentic. Right? You're smart enough, like the Saturday Night Live, but you have, again, this desire, well, gee, I'd love to know more about that. This lifetime learning still resonates with me. And so it's hard for me to look back and say, I'm looking at a path I laid out. I didn't. I look back and say, wow, you know, they must have seen something, right? I was working. I did take my work. That's the one thing I say too. Take your work seriously. Don't take yourself seriously. These are old platitudes, but they are so true. And get along with people. That's not to say everyone loved me. There are people who I'm sure didn't, but it's this enthusiasm that comes from within about what you're doing at that time. So I look back and I feel very, very, very lucky to be in places, to have the opportunities to do things I never would have thought of, really, at all. And then, okay, flip side, knowing what I know today,
I wouldn't be that, but since you've gone down that path.
Knowing what I know today and knowing the world today, I feel a little envious because what if I had even thought, I did think about law school. I didn't really think about business school, but I took continuing education courses at Georgetown. And also I took art history. I think it was the New School in New York and what have you. Throughout my career, I was always going somewhere. But if I knew what I knew then, what I knew today, then I would probably develop myself a little differently. Education would be the the main event underpinning. But I thought, gosh, looking back at what I did do, I wish I was running, God forbid, raising the money for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, or more importantly, MoMA. And I'm not a contemporary artist collector. But what I'm saying is, I didn't know I could do so well until I did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And were there points or junctures or inflection points along the way that gave you that confidence that, I can do this and I can actually do more as well? The things that stand out when you reflect back on?
Well, you have to fail too. And so I had my really first failure of measurement, and I'm not sure I failed or the institution did, but candidly at Union Carbide, where I was in their Washington office, having been at EPA, and they heard me give a speech and they thought maybe we'll put as a lobbyist, they had that, but a communications facility in the Washington office. Was very wow at that time in Washington, circa 76, maybe 5, I can't remember. But then there was an opportunity open to be the head of communications for Union Carbide out of New York. But I wasn't on anyone's radar. I was a girl, a young woman, to be funny. And so that wasn't going to happen. And I had several conversations about it, and it just was like talking to a wall, So that was a big bump in the road. I ultimately just chose to leave and actually start a little consulting business on issues management, working with Braun and Company out of California, who I shared office space with. And other, but the rest is sort of just going by the Braille method, if you will, just feeling my way along.
Yeah.
And it didn't hurt me. Cherry of Interior, where I caught my first salmon, and we had it for dinner. They had to have the president's chef prepare the salmon as an appetizer because
farm to fork, right? Or
make sure there were no bones. But anyway, so I left Interior and went to Wharton, and so was a little bit surprised that I had a call to come talk to Howard Baker, who was then chief of staff, about labor. And the irony is I had to make a choice when they offered it to me. There were 2 other women also. And I had to make a choice. And I guess it seemed like a no-brainer to be in the cabinet. I did serve on the Wharton board for 20 years after that. But anyway, I did leave to go to labor. So labor was an interesting department circa 1987. It was the beginning of, again, the new American workforce. We had done a report with the Hudson Institute, had done a report, Bureau of Labor Statistics did a report, all on the demographics that we could see well into 2020 and beyond, really. And so here we're sitting and it's happening, the diversity of the workforce for sure. And we saw that coming when, as I put it then, people in the stands were coming down to the playing field. Diversity by color, by gender, etc. And so it was an exciting time to be at the Labor Department, combined with a little more focus on employment issues, childcare, for example, elder care, all the things that again came along as I look back now, it's all here. And so I had the opportunity to have a 2.5 year or so run there with an agenda that I was very comfortable undertaking with the president's support. And he, he was head of the Screen Actors Guild. So he was a member of a union. And so I got to know Lane Kirkland, who was head of the AFL-CIO through Bill Sapphire, and others, and worked well. In fact, a small story when I talked to Lane Kirkland, who was a giant at the AFL-CIO in those days, he said, "You're going to be surprised." I said, "Why?" He said, "My favorite labor secretary, the one we worked so well with, was James Mitchell, who was labor secretary for Eisenhower, a Republican." And I said, "Well, cheers." It's good. Anyway, so I would say the opportunity to run a department, you can do two things in government. You can sit on top of it, it'll run. Believe me, it'll run, right, wrong, or whatever, or to lead it. And if you lead it, you're doing it in the interests and the agenda of the president. And I think that's what I was lucky to have at that time. I can tell you a Reagan story if you'd like right now.
I love it.
Okay, well, I mentioned, well, there are a couple, but I mentioned childcare. And we had done a demographics with BLS and others, as I said, but we also worked a lot with companies and all, and the childcare was an issue, a big issue. And they were moving, they being the Democrats, I guess, at the time, but the Hill was addressing childcare on a more macro way. And so the work we did pretty well indicated people wanted family childcare or emergency childcare or religious childcare. It's not a one size fits all, as they say. And so we came up with some really good research and work in this area. And also what were companies already doing? And a lot of them, God forbid, had childcare services within the building, as did the labor department. So we became our own test case. We also had a place to pick up your dry cleaning and leave it. We also had a place to pick up a fast food to bring home to dinner, and we had childcare to leave your child. And okay, it was time for me to go with a report we did, which I think we did. I can't remember now. I may have done that with the economics professor I had at Wharton, but don't hold me to it. I did use them for one study. But anyway, it was exciting because this was going to be released publicly. And I went over to the White House, met the president in the corner seating area there in the Oval Office. And I gave him the report, told him what it said, told him what the highlights were. And this tells so much about him. He broke right in and he said, "Ann, when I was president of the Screen Actors Guild, we had the local churches help take care of children for the actors so that they could either go to an audition or have a job." So he got it right away. And it was so amazing. Then as I was leaving, I said, "Mr. President, I'm probably going to get a little bruised when this report goes out, because a lot of, frankly, conservatives didn't see it the way we did, which was when they heard childcare, they reacted if they heard what we were saying is what's needed, a little different." And he said, "Well, Ann, you only get bruised when you're trying to accomplish something." And I thought that was so Reagan-esque, because when he was campaigning for tax cuts and said, "You can spend your money better than we can, the government," he was told by Dick Werthland, the pollster, "I don't think everyone's with you yet," meaning the people of America. He said, "Well, I'll have to give some more speeches." So he was at the core just an incredible person to work with and supportive to at least this cabinet secretary, and I'm sure others. Yet he had his own experiences to draw on, his own views. So it was a great honor and a lot of fun too. As a matter of fact, I'm on the Reagan Foundation board, so it's a nice way to stay involved.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask you about that in a little bit later on, because I visited out there, as you know, in Simi Valley, beautiful place.
Right? Yeah.
I was just wondering, he was the great communicator by all measure.
Right.
And I'm a German nut, so I go to Germany a lot. And I was at Brandenburg last year, actually, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
It was their last trip I made into Europe. And I remember standing where he gave the speech around Tear Down the Wall. It gives you kind of chill bumps to be part of history. Remember that, and how he can convey the simple truths of the day in a way that average people around the world.
So true. I was there when they put the statue in there by the embassy, right at Brandenburg Gate, about 3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember. It's goosebumps, if I can say that. It's really, really, really terrific. And I've reflected in recent years on his relationship with Gorbachev too, through that whole period, and the wall coming down and the like. It's the tear down this wall was, he knew how to message, but he also was trusted, I think. He's a exemplar of leadership for anybody, in my view. No, there are others, but I think he's a real exemplar leadership. And it wasn't just because he could communicate. That was a big part of it. I always said about President Reagan, he had that moral compass. He was a good man.
Yeah.
Good man.
And that actually is the segue into, I just wanted to just very briefly, you helped develop what is just a spectacular place where he and his wife rest now out in Simi Valley in California. What was that like? What went into the planning of that? And for the listeners that haven't visited that, regardless whether you're Democrat, conservative, independent, you ought to go anyway. It's just a spectacular building, a lot of history, beautiful vista overlooking the mountains and the valley of California. It's just spectacular. But what went into that, Ann? Because I know it's a source of pride for you.
Well, you remember they had the house, and that's still available, it's still there, in Paso Robles, so up in that part of the world, and love that kind of ranch and all. And of course, it had room for growth. And of course, then we did the Air Force One Pavilion, and now there's even other parts that are all part of that. And it is the most visited library, if you will, in the system. And I think in part because I think the other libraries are wonderful. Everyone should see the presidential libraries, but I'd have to say, I think the Reagan Foundation work there is pretty spectacular. So the programming is exciting, and they wanted it to be alive. And now we have the Ronald Reagan Institute in Washington on 16th Street, unfortunately damaged by some of the demonstrations and all, along with everything else on that block. But that's played to this tear down the wall kind of approach to being close to where public policy and those kinds of things are being deliberated.
No, I think
so it's a really great. It's a great visit. They have this Discovery Center there, to be sounding like I'm advertising for them, but it's primarily for fifth graders, although one of the insurance companies used it for training. It's really, it's an Oval Office, a press room, and a situation room. So deliberating policy, you saw it. Deliberating foreign policy. And
how come we never had a board meeting there, Ann? That's what I want to know at Kellogg. That would have been great.
We should have done that.
In the sit room, it would have been great.
Why didn't we? That would have been a great idea.
Fun.
I was just excited when Kellogg decided to go and meet the people from Kashi and have a board meeting there, and I'd already left the board.
A little progress. Hey, I wanted to switch gears with you on just on human nature. I mean, you led a lot of the work around aviation and terrorism, and M103 Lockerbie bombing. What did you take away from that experience about life as I guess we know it today, but also the human condition? What did you take out of that?
Of course, that was, that's pre 9/11, and that commission called me when they were undertaking a review of that. That was horrific. Well, there's several things. One, it's real. It's real that people can find ways to get a bomb on a plane and blow it up. And our work was at the time not to find the who, but the how. And the how was an unmatched bag. So you come away with a respect for regulations, even though I can't say that I'm a big regulator, but regulations are important. Implementing them is much more important. And so there was an extra bag that got on the plane from Malta, as we know now, and the like. But we took that commission all over to all the airports, Frankfurt, Heathrow, et cetera. And the second thing that hits you is there's this strange disconnect between people going about their work. In this case, we were watching the moving bags and what have you. And then some evil thinking people about to blow a plane up. And I know as we went through the process, we said, soon it's going to be, it's going to be a bomb like this, the size of a pen in someone's pocket. The point being that as I got to see the government reaction, which was pretty extraordinary, there was a lot they knew in classified land. And then there was the political concern. And the big part of what made success for Pan Am 103 were the families of those who had lost people. And that was the force driving.
Yeah, they push.
Yeah. And so there were, what do they say? There was noise in the system. Is that the way they used to say it? I think that there was something going on. But in some cases, a lot of things weren't read. I can't say that we said it was preventable. But we did talk about the need to have moral courage in policymaking in our report. And the report lived to this day, really. And so I think what my big takeaway was, don't underestimate the power of your voice as an American. And don't underestimate our government's ability to change. And don't underestimate there are bad people who want to do bad things. And they still do and then did after. And it was, of all the things I did in government, it was certainly the one thing I did that I was the most proud of, because I have to say this somewhat with sensitivity. There were some who didn't want a commission in government. There were some who thought, okay, yeah, do that. That's good for the families, right? We took it very seriously. And the smartest thing I did is to sit down with Bill Rogers, who chaired the shuttle commission, the shuttle that blew up.
Yep, O-rings.
And the reason was that he talked to me about the operating of a commission that I staffed with help. We had 2 congressmen, 2 senators, a couple of others on the commission. So I was able to draw on some staff there and all, but the main thing is do it right the first time. So he made that really a big impression on me of don't have a commission investigate your commission, So we did, and our report stood the test of time. And the other thing we did that I thought was amazing, in fact, I talked to the individual who I'll mention, Mike Miller. I had this idea that so many of these reports come out and nobody can read them, right? They're in governmentese or whatever. So we hired Mike Miller, whom I knew through somebody in Washington, and he's a writer, PR type, but writer. And so he took and helped form the nature of the report, but he then took the report, in effect, pieces of it, and wrote it in English, if you will. The most important thing is that those families would understand both what happened as best as we could. Some was classified. That was not relevant for families at the time or now. And then the other was the repair of where the gaps were, either legislatively or within the Department of State or whatever. And I think that was smart. And so when I think it was Governor Keane of New Jersey called me about, he was co-chair in the 9/11 Commission. That was the one thing I said, the best thing you can do is make it in English so people really have a chance to understand how something like this could happen. Because again, there were warnings around. Now, it's a different day, but it's the same problem. There are people who don't like us and they don't care about human life the way we do.
Yeah.
And so still lessons from that. The moral, what did we say? The moral courage. This was my chapter I fought for. Moral courage and political will. That's what it was in the chapter. I'm so proud of that because that's what you need in cases like this, or to prevent them even.
Yeah. And that actually leads me to another line of questioning around the private sector. And because you served on a lot of boards
Mm-hmm.
with very diverse industries, from Microsoft and tech to food at Kellogg to airlines with American Airlines and raw materials at Vulcan. I'm just curious, you as a board member, how did you understand these businesses and how did you determine where you'd make your fullest contribution in these businesses that are very different from each other?
It's a great question. One, you want independent people on a board, so independent of the company.
Mhm.
That's important, especially in these years. So I was about as independent as you could get, relatively speaking. Having been exposed, however, to corporations through government service, and I think the first board I went on was a bank board in Washington, D.C. 100 years ago. You were able to draw on a lot of familiarity, let me put it that way. I eat Kellogg cereal, or I ate cereal, I fly on planes, etc. So your own experience is a big part of it. But the other part is what I call your nose twitching. People who are on boards understand what I mean. You have to have a nose that twitches. And
doesn't quite smell right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And or it's just one of these, I don't think I like what I hear.
I don't think I'm getting the whole picture here.
Right. It's invaluable to have a certain amount of listening capability, not in an I gotcha way, don't misunderstand, but in a way that says, is he the right guy for that job? Because he didn't sound like he was on top of it. And that you could raise something like that with a CEO. So you're trying to have a pipeline with other directors in a collegial way. Did you hear what I heard? Did you see what I said? You have obviously business acumen somewhere along your life to be asked. And in the cases of a lot of boards, it was because in part of government service, or in part because of my Wharton experience. I did finish all my corporate accounting and the like, even if I didn't practice it. And so you're bringing, I think the more diversified your background, the more help you can be, assuming you again have moral courage and some kind of political will, small p political, meaning it's not a confrontational environment. It should be a collegial environment. And in its collegial environment of working together with others who are as equal to you in importance at that board as you are, that you can observe, discuss, opine, ask, probe, whatever you want to use, and just be understanding why. There's always a reason for that company to be. And there's always people who are trying to get there with the leadership. So you have employees at the lowest to the highest level, and you have customers, and you have suppliers and the like. So suddenly you have this whole institution that's spread all over, and being lived in the real world, you have a real chance, and in the government world, I guess, it helped me, but you have a real chance to just opine based on your own experiences and your own judgment of.
Yeah.
My point is that your colleagues to oversee for shareholders, and now broadly speaking, employees, community, everybody, we're doing the right thing. We're trying to make a product, we're trying to sell it, we're trying to be truthful, we're trying to be good, and we're trying to compete, so you got all the array of business opportunities there. But I think it mostly comes down to the person's experience of.
Yeah. And what I liked about you, Ann, I actually look forward to the Kellogg board meetings. I have to say I didn't look forward to them in other companies, but Kellogg was always
Always good.
I always felt like the board was there to support. They, for me, you ask a lot of questions, but they're always good, and they were well-intentioned questions, as opposed to trying to make.
Not I got you.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
gotcha. Where another
No,
board,
got-
people delight in doing that for some reason I've never understood.
Yeah, I know it. You should be able. What you're part of. You're part of the company as a board of directors. With your independence, you're a part of the company.
Yeah.
The thing about Kellogg is that we all shared, I think, both the privilege and the responsibility to be on the board of a company with whom we grew up.
Yes. Mhm.
And snap, crackle, and pop. I still have rubberized snap, crackle, and pop people around here somewhere the kids play with. And so Kellogg was an amazing experience for me, and I loved every minute of it. But you were there for a reason.
Yeah, indeed.
And kept that in mind. I'm glad to hear you say that, Dennis, from your point of view, because I too enjoyed the board immensely there.
Yeah, I thought Gordon ran a great show. John, I loved working for from the CEO standpoint. Jim was Jim. He was just kind of the leavening agent. But I thought the board was hugely responsible because you got to the issues, but you got to them in the right way, as opposed to the win-lose way that a lot of boards act, which created this more esprit. Like, we would look forward to the board meeting as opposed to another board.
Yeah.
Now, how do we cast this in a different light and protect ourselves?
That's nice. Yeah.
When I went into Kellogg, I'll be honest, I was shocked when John said, we're going to have a working session on this issue. I'd never seen it before. I mean, and the other boards that have been part of it was like, you get in, you present, you get off, no questions is success. And
Yeah, it's managed.
no, we got a couple issues I don't know how to crack, so we're going to kind of lay it out and let the board opine on it and see what we can get out of it, because I don't have a good answer. I thought that was pretty good.
I'll give you my a long time I've said this. Two things. One, I've said it to every CEO I've worked with. You must listen to your board, period. You don't have to do everything they say. You make your judgment. That's what you're paid to do. But if it goes wrong, so long.
Yeah.
We are your employer. But you must listen. Don't wave them off. And I've seen that. The other thing is, you couldn't afford a board with the backgrounds you have in this room. You couldn't afford them if they were Booz Allen or McKinsey. That's what you have here.
Yeah.
And so you use the different backgrounds and experience to the advantage of your company and all parts of it, employees and the like. So I think I'll say one other thing, because I said it recently to someone else. When I was on the GM board, we did a big turnaround. Governance was becoming a cottage industry at that point, with Ira Milstein in New York and crazy stuff. This was 89, 90, 91, I think. And it just seemed to be a cottage industry. We had all these groups growing up and all. Well, now it's a full-fledged multinational governance.
Right.
And truthfully, I don't know. Looking back, I'm still on one corporate board, but I'm on some nonprofits. They too have matured, and I think it's to the good. But now I think maybe it's there's too much check the box stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that. Governance has got the capital G on it versus the lowercase that I think it does. One thing, other question I wanted to ask you is, you were on boards for quite a number of years, and you saw rotations of CEOs, and I was just curious in terms of what you think about in terms of what the attributes are of a successful CEO versus those that aren't as successful. Because you've got a unique perch, over many companies over many years.
Yeah, I've seen a lot. I think I was, this is not something I'm patting myself on the back, but it's a reality of what happens in board world. I think I was on, or part of, I should put it that way, part of a board. And in a couple of cases as lead director to dismiss 11 CEOs in my career. And I guess I would have to say all for a variety of reasons, but the number one thing is total integrity. I'd put as number one. And integrity with your peers, it's integrity with your employees, it's integrity with your customers. And what I mean by that is not just, honest Joe, but that you're creating the culture of a company that people want to work there, and people value they value what they see we stand for in a company. And there are those that are able to do that. It's a leadership definition, certainly. But I can think of the people who, they didn't go out of their way to slap you on the back. I don't mean hail fellow, well met. They are leaders and have the opportunity to develop leaders and lead others in a way that must be trustworthy, integrity, honesty, and also taking chances, developing people, giving them a chance to fail if they do, but give them a chance, and then they'll know who they are and what they can do. And a couple of CEOs I work with did the development of their people so well that it was a big part of their job. And I don't mean developing just their successor, developing people,
The organization.
and moving them around, all that stuff. So that's what I think. I worked for some with some for a number of years that are just, knock your socks off people because of their own qualities. In all cases, education too, and experience. So you have to fill the well up with your own abilities to lead a company or be in a company. I think I'm a big proponent of, as I said, lifetime learning, but education. I don't mean degrees. I mean types of education.
Experiences, skills, development.
Yeah.
And Ann, last question on boards. I was just curious, again, given your experience, how do you maintain the level of independence on a board without slipping over into running the company? Because I've seen that in some cases where people kind of drifted off into, well, I kind of know it better than they do. Let me go muck around a bit.
Well, there's two types who will do that. One, a former CEO, or a current CEO on another company board.
Yeah.
So let me tell you how I do it.
Yeah.
And then there are those who think they're there to know more than the CEO.
Yeah.
Some divine inspiration comes to them somehow, and they can do it. So I think the good news about all the governance today is you have models of ways to do things. As an example, I don't want to give a company a strategic plan, but I sure would like the board to be involved. And I like being involved in where we're going. I like those pillars, give me 5 years of growth and EBITDA and EPS and the like, and the businesses. Boy, show me that and how you're going to get there. I'll be right there with you. And if not, tell me why, So I think, I don't know all about the airline industry, but what's hilarious, I eat Kellogg cereal, I flew American Airlines and all. Life experiences are very informative for a board member, I think, because you look at things differently. But generally speaking, I think the majority of a board aren't trying to run the company unless they are former, and then they can't help themselves. It's worse too if they're retired.
Yeah, and they haven't quite figured out what to do with one's life, so they muck around in somebody else's nest. Yeah, I've seen that. The other question I wanted to ask you on both work in public service and government, and then with major companies, is there a difference in leadership that you've seen, or is it pretty similar but applied differently?
Between public service and a company, government, high levels, any level. Yes, I think it's very different in part. The problem with I didn't say a problem. That's not the right way for me to start. I have observed, and I'm sure anybody who pays attention observes, I said it earlier, you can sit on top of a government agency and be very self-important. I'm secretary of, or director of, or I run the SEC and, you know, whatever, I run the FTC. I'm important because the trappings of government make you important. Sometimes the trappings of business do too. You get a special parking place, right? Or whatever. So that's one thing. And if the culture of a company, you know, is to genuflect to the CEO and the CEO suite and the CEO's assistant and the CEO's that and that, that can get a little bit out of control too sometimes, I think. So in government, you're there not for yourself, and you're really not there for the department or organization that you're with in government. You're there to implement the president's policies. And if you don't agree with them, then you shouldn't take the job.
Yeah.
And I know that at least press people have told me over the years, and I'm not going to mention other presidents, but they said the one thing about the Reagan administration is no matter where you went, you got the same answer. And what they mean is if I went to OMB and I went to the Department of Labor and then I went over to Commerce, you know, who are the business side of the job creation, I got the same answer because we were leading those departments in the way the president's commitment to the American people was on whatever. And that was more of it was a combination of philosophical and practical. If the president wanted me to go into labor and do A and I did B, that's not good. But I signed on because I knew what the administration stood for. In a company, you have to be a lot more, I think, ambidextrous, because the winds of change can come at you from a competitor, from a regulator, from another country, from a bad storm, rotten corn. Yeah. So you're definitely, whereas thankfully the civil service, well, I do say this, my experience is the civil servants, the people who are there all the time, not political appointees, they want to help you get where you're trying to get, and keep you out of trouble, not just you, the secretary, but your administration in that department, if you let them know where you're trying to go. But after about 6 months, if you haven't told them where you're trying to go and you treat them like the enemy, they're going to go do what they think they should do.
Yeah.
I think that's the same with employees in a private company. Yeah. Just tell me where we're trying to go. Yeah. I said this to someone at Microsoft. I'll leave it at that, not Bill Gates, but I said, you know, you have a 50-page strategic plan. Do the employees of Microsoft know where you want to go? 91,000 of them. Do they know where you're? Well, maybe not 91,000. I said, well, then you're not going to get there. So it's the same in a way. There is the communications to get the help to go forward.
You know, interestingly, and I interviewed Paul Pullman. Paul is, he ran Unilever for 10 years, and he's a good friend of mine. I worked for him years ago when I was at P&G. And I watched him put Unilever on the map in terms of the outperform the consumer segment. Displaced P&G as the best consumer products company. And he had a one-page sustainable living plan. One page. That was the strategy that he deployed in an intentional way to build commitment and understanding to the choices the company was going to make and the expectations they would therefore have on the employees, and for the employees to feel like they could attach themselves to it, that it was meaningful, that it created connection, which is so important with today's workforce, which is kind of where I want to take the next question, because you had mentioned at the outset that, boy, looking back, a little wistfulness, like, boy, I'd like to be right in it today. What would you recommend for younger people that are watching this webcast in terms of how they might develop themselves, how they might better prepare themselves from the future? You touched on that a little bit, but I was wondering if you had 2 or 3 things that really would commend to the next generation of leadership in terms of what you pay attention to, what would those be?
That's a good question. The one thing that goes without saying, no matter if they're going to be a poet, a painter, or in the profit making, to the hilt, you got to know technology. The chances are they do. The chances are they know it a lot better than I'll ever know it. But the role of technology to help you move forward is like having both a left and right brain. And so I'm a big go to school, get education, college, or some specialty. But I do think that this lifetime learning commitment is in the technical field, and it's in your aspirational who you are field of developing, finding out who you are. So I think that's probably one. The second is they use an express cocktail party looking around at who I was supposed to know. Networking. That's it. I hate that word. Networking sounds like a contrived, with your aspirations, go get. So developing friends and relationships, people you can go to ask questions and what have you, it's your way of lifetime learning, I think, is important, and open and honest and what have you. And I think that's important. I also think the third thing I'd say is if you're asked to do something and it sounds of interest, then do it. Because as I said, our work 30 years ago is that you're going to change careers 5 times in a lifetime or 6 times or whatever. So if it's interesting, then do it. It's not the rest of your life. It's an experience for now and a learning opportunity. So I guess the idea of, I don't know what I want to be. I don't know what I want to do. Does that sound important enough? Am I going to make enough money? My friend Charlie's getting more money. My friend Sally is on her way to the C-suite, where we do have more women and the like. So I think being mindful that a vibrant private sector is made by you and the kinds of people you have a chance to be with. I think a role in government is a nice thing, but it might be a role with a nonprofit. It might be a role with your church. It might be a role with, a theater in town. It might be. So if you're working at A, B, C, D, E, and F can come along, and you can figure out how to put that in there. As I say, a nonprofit or even something for enjoyment. I don't know if that answers your question, but
I wanted to take it, if I could, one step further. Ann, as a woman that blazed a lot of trails and broke a lot of glass ceilings, as the old adage goes, what would you commend for young women in terms of how they might kind of break through? There's momentum now that didn't exist 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Huge.
But there's still barriers that are there, both visible and non-visible.
It's funny, as I see a lot of young women today, and they talk to me or ask or whatever, and I'm just so impressed by what women are doing today. The head of Lockheed Martin, the head of a lot of the defense manufacturers are women, and then how you get to the C-suite, if you will, that's important. I'll have to just say one story. As an only woman a lot, or one of 2, there's a story that's told, and it is so true, that one, I tell women, if you're at the boardroom table or at a meeting table, speak up. Your voice is as good as anyone else's. So if you're sitting there thinking of something, say it. And it goes along with this idea that I say it and nobody reacts. And then Dennis says it, and everyone said, good idea, Dennis.
Yeah, right.
And then what a woman should say, and I've never done it, a woman should say, Dennis put my idea so much better than I did.
But that happens a lot, doesn't it? That is the ism.
It still happens. Yeah. I think it still happens, frankly. But take it in stride. So I say to young women today, don't get mad and don't waste your time getting even. Get better.
Mhm.
Get better, do better, be there. You want to be easy to work with. Man should too. I don't like men who are not easy to work with. Well, why would they like a woman not easy to work with? You know that?
Yeah.
So if you're grumpy or know it all, but the young women today are so much more self-assured, and I think it's because they've been in a bigger pot together. They've been through things together, and are growing up together and growing in businesses together, starting their own businesses. There's so many more opportunities than we had. So I think we're over a lot, but we are different, and the differences should be used to the advantage of each of us, in this world today.
Yeah.
And make them positive.
Indeed. And then the last question I had for you, because I don't want to run over the time allotted, and I already have, but I apologize for that. But
oh, that's great. I'm talking.
Yeah, tell me about your passion for art. And what I was really thinking about asking was, how was that stimulated? And just as importantly, that passion for art, has that made you a better leader in your professional life? Is there a connection there?
Yeah, that's interesting. Insofar as I think having a multi-dimensional life is sort of neat. Well, yes. There's nothing worse than one note Johnny, right? As we used to say. So you want to have different dimensions to you. And I years ago, way before you, Dennis, you could get John Nagy on television, black and white television. They would send you a cardboard kit and charcoal pencil, and you would work with John Nagy on black and white television and learn how to draw. That's where I started, more or less. And so I love the outlet of creative expression. I've tried the piano. Not much I haven't tried. And if it takes, you keep doing it. With art, I think you see things quite differently. First of all, you see the world differently. You see the bush behind the bush behind the bush. You see the fish in the pond before anyone else. You see the growth of flowers in ways you never thought until you try to draw it, right? That's one set of lessons. You see more, absorb more. The other set is on the human side, and that's the respect for an artist who starts their day with a blank canvas. What will I do today?
Mm-hmm.
And you draw from inside. I suspect, and I think it's true, for me at least, every day seemed like a new day. You don't go in to the labor department or the interior department where you're responsible for all these people and have your head down saying, I don't know what to do. You have a blank canvas every day. And yeah, you can also go back and touch up. But basically your canvas is, it's a fresh day. So whatever happened yesterday, I'm not angry. I'm not overly happy. I'm looking at today. What's today bring me that I can work with? So I think it's that. And then I think we all need appreciation of creativity in anyone. I can't play the piano. I took lessons. I really can't paint, but I do. But I can collect, I can buy, I can meet artists, and that gives my persona, the way I look at things, another dimension, doesn't it? And there's creativity at Kellogg, how they design the boxes, what's going to be attractive, right? There's creativity all around us. So it's stopping to absorb a little of that into your soul, probably, I guess.
Good on
Anyway.
You. And listen, this is terrific. I could talk to you for hours, but I bet you that's Sarah calling saying, hey, Ann, you're past your time.
One call was the husband who wants to know if I need anything. I bet he's downtown. We're up
Okay.
here in the mountains.
I'll
No,
let you get the
Grandpa,
time.
and I hope you can get something meaningful out of it, but it's always, I'm talking to you like we're having a martini at the Pierre.
That's
Anyway,
good.
it's
That's
just
what makes you good.
fun,
Ann.
and they're great thoughts. If you can share anything there that's worthwhile for young people, that's the best.
All right.
You know,
I
so
appreciate you making time for me. You are without doubt my favorite board person. I will say that publicly and from the mountaintop. Appreciate it
nice.
very much. Nice seeing your face.
Listen, get out here. You said in your note
I
to me,
know,
think.
I know, and I'm going to.
Okay,
All
we're
right.
here. Let us know.
Okay. Hey, take care of yourself.